Hello, today is July 11th, 2018, and this is the sub-project for SIG testing called Testing Commons, and we are currently discussing a recent PR that relates to the long-term proposal that we've been talking about for quite some time. All right, Hannes, go.
Go, good. Yeah, we opened this PR to the test cluster framework. Keep in mind, this is a rough work in progress. One thing that PR starts is creating a second implementation of a test cluster, namely now backed by the kubeadm Docker and Docker cluster thing from originally, I guess, from Mirantis. We are hoping to, with that, to drive out some stuff on our cluster config, how it should look, especially the shape part of it. And that's where we are currently in the middle of. So right now, what we are working on is a PR into the kubeadm DND cluster repo, which allows us as a first step to spin up multiple clusters in parallel, so we can have the isolation of basically, if you want isolation of test runs, if you will. Second part will be pushing the config, which kind of is right now based on the kubeadm config. So serializing that and pushing that into the Docker and Docker cluster to be picked up by the kubeadm then internally. So if those things we are thinking about, those two changes to the kubeadm DND cluster are done, I think we can progress with this work in progress PR to the test cluster framework and drive out more features regarding the actual config and especially regarding the shape, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. To me, it does. Does it make sense to other folks? What PRs do you have? Do you want to link to the PRs, to the kubedmd?
We are currently working on them. We are hoping to push the first one today.
Okay.
But there is none yet, but soon. Okay. And then we can link to them.
If you want to, feel free to join the SIG Cluster Lifecycle channel on Slack and poke me when those PRs are ready, and I can loop in Ivan, and he can review those.
Cool. Yeah, will do. Yeah, other than that, as said, the PR, which is currently open for the test cluster framework, is very rough when it comes to the config and, yeah, basically when it comes to everything. But still, if anyone is interested in looking into which direction we are thinking of going, please feel free to check it, and any comment or anything regarding that is very much appreciated.
I think I'm going to force us to do this, like make it a forcing function on our side, just because it is important, even though it's not necessarily urgent. Yep. So I will force assign a couple of folks, including you, Liz, as well as Ruben and myself.
Cool. Thanks.
I don't know. I have not talked with the Minikube folks in forever. And I do know that they were also creating like an interface library for doing a configuration and setup. And there was a bunch of, the reason why DIND was chosen originally was that Minikube did not offer the features that we wanted, basically being able to have the multiple node configuration. That was the key feature that was required. I have not touched base with any of those folks in recent memory. to see whether or not they've added that capability or whether or not they've developed a clean client interface. And I also know that there's, for DINT implementations, Mirantis was the most ubiquitously known. It has the largest mind share for the solution, but there are other folks who have done, from SIG cluster lifecycle perspective, we have seen other solutions that existed that are also DINT based. JetStack created one, and I believe there was, what's it called? Who's the .mesh had also created one, but it's not as mature. And the goal, ideally, was to make it Go based in the long run. So that way you could just transition all of this, because the current implementation from Mirantis is Bash, right? Which is not ideal if you were trying to like reference structs and pass it all through and make it all clean. But I don't know what the state of that is. So I think understanding the state of where some of these other pieces are, I know that you can get the implementation for that DINT in place, and you might even want to wrap it internally. So I'll take a look at the PR from the testing area perspective, but you might want to have like a nice little crust around the implementation of what goes into the backend DINT, because that backend DINT might not just be solution A, it might be solution B, it might be solution C. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely makes sense. As it stands right now, we were not thinking about like having one DINT backend, which then supports again multiple implementations of DINT, but we can look into that.
Yeah, I think the configuration struct is so generic that it should, as it passes through, it should apply to multiple quote unquote providers, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
But I will definitely review. I saw it come through. My Mac did an update and destroyed my Windows, so I need to get my history back on Chrome. I had a Windows set aside, and I was going to look at it this morning before we had this meeting. And then I did a Mac update, and then my productivity went to crap.
But yeah, because you brought it up, the Minikube stuff. Yeah, I'd be interested to look into that. Not saying that we necessarily implement something, at least not yet, but just to see what's going on there. I think we will now focus on making the kubeadm DINT cluster a thing as a provider or whatever, and then iterate from there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the right approach. Are there other things to chat about? I do know that some of the PRs have gone in or are going in for cleaning up the dependency graph inside of, what's it called? Upstream, kubeadm master config. And we are pushing master config to be either alpha 3 or beta 1. I would like to get it to beta 1, and this is probably be an ongoing effort, but that could affect, we can make it maybe a precursor if we want to go to beta 1 to reduce the depth graph so you can actually import master config without having to like eat all of Kubernetes. I do know that they were separating out the component config work, and that was a big one. Because what happens is some of the parameters are very generic, and then all of a sudden you get to component config. And then component config links into all this other stuff. So that one was I think the thorny detail of the buckyball. So you like picked up one thing and you had this entire hairball's nest of dependencies. So that was planned. It's tentatively planned. I need to walk through that stuff maybe today or tomorrow.
Okay, cool.
That's all I think I have right now. Are there any other topics? No? All right.
Not from our side.
Okay. I saw there's newcomers. Ben, Tim, any questions, comments, complaints, concerns?
I'm Ben. I'm working with the Londoners from Digital. Slightly different focus. I'm more focused on Windows contributions, but decided to pop in to see what this is all about.
Okay.
And I'm Tim. I am actually the release lead for 1.12, so I'm just trying to pay a little closer attention to test-related activities during the cycle. And I know this isn't exactly related to the release, the discussion here, but just to have a sense of what's in flight and things coming down the path.
In an ideal world, I would love to replace some of the test infra tooling with a backend infrastructure that we could kind of create to help the automation be a lot faster instead of provisioning bajillions of clusters. That's an ideal goal, but I don't know if we'll. It's been very slow because this is from this is not my P0 effort. It probably won't be unless somebody tells me otherwise.
I think to some extent that's even in the name of this meeting. Like a lot of this test infrastructure stuff outside of the major things that Google has or the different providers kind of in-house, there's a bit of a tragedy of the commons here right now. And there's some big long-term work to do to improve, I think. It's going to take some sustained investment.
Yes, we've been plugging away at it slowly but surely, you know.
Yeah, things are definitely improving. And I think you've mentioned before, those of us who are newer coming in our companies, we need to advocate within them to fund this work, that it's not just sitting there.
I think there's definitely interested parties. I think maybe what we could do this cycle, which goes beyond the scope of just the technical work, is to do some more mindshare broadcasting. And I could maybe even start that maybe on Kubernetes Dev, because there are plenty of folks who aren't core developers, but are basically creating integrations with Kubernetes. This is specifically meant to target, part of this is specifically meant to facilitate that level of integration, right? To make it easier for them to set up CI. If they can set up that CI, then even the core, as you split out pieces of the core, like kube-control, as well as other integration pieces, like from Heptio's perspective, that could be Arc or Sonobuoy, or even Contour, or all the other integrations that we're working on. So there are plenty of other folks who are building third-party integrations, and without having to actually spin up a whole cluster on a provider, you should be able to have a full test environment hermetically sealed for CI without you having to even Minikube itself is only one node, right? And if you want to be able to simulate a multi-node environment, that is pretty important.
Yep, totally agree. For dev test, I mean, I haven't looked at the spreadsheet in a while, but last I looked, probably in May, there were like 70 distributions. So there's a lot of people doing this, and there's a big need then for pre-testability and testing also on the integrations. You can't just rely on upstreams, a commit going into upstream and getting the CI results back then. That's way too late.
Yeah. So I think what I'll try to do, maybe I can do with this group, is craft a statement, and then I'll put it on the Slack channel to see if folks want to. I will craft a statement. I will have Liz wordsmith it because I'm terrible, and tell me how wrong I am, and then I'll pass it off to the group here to take a look to try and see if we want to modify it. Does that seem like a fair action item?
Yeah, I think it's good.
Are there any other topics, thoughts here?
Oh, one thing maybe, there is this kube builder thing, which uses the test cluster framework for their testing. And eventually I want to talk to them and also have them check basically our API or whatever we are working on to validate that they are also happy with that as users of the test framework.
Yes, that's Phil Whitrock and company on it. I think there's a couple other VMware folks in there too, Tim. So we can I'd be happy to help facilitate that coordination. I can talk with Phil now, mention it, because Phil is also responsible for the kube control.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that makes sense. Maybe I should
I-
just have a conversation with Phil.
Yeah, maybe, I'm not sure. Maybe it's a little too early right now. Maybe we wait until we have figured out how our config and the API actually might look.
Mhm.
Maybe not, I don't know. But eventually I want to talk to them to see if the thing fits their needs.
I think it would, because if people are building, Kube Builder is basically for people who are building the integrations, right?
Yeah.
Like people who are not natively Kubernetes developers that want to do a CRD-based integration with Kubernetes. It makes perfect sense. That's a natural home and fit for some of that stuff. It's a great idea. Are there any other things? You're on mute, Gareth.
Are these action items you're writing out now?
Yes.
They're currently in the notes section, and you've got an action items.
I know. I'm going to actually
Okay, fine.
this section and do AI. Yeah.
Cool. Great. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Going once, twice, 3 times. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.